Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, of course, I thought that I would give my little fight review of the Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez versus Juan Francisco Estrada fight. I do not remember personally Juan Francisco Estrada's nickname, El Royo, or whatever it may be. But, anyways, of course, for those of you that did not end up tuning into this fight, Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, just like I would have predicted had I put out my fight prediction, ended up winning this fight. Now, I think that I probably would have assumed that this fight would have been won by that of unanimous decision, or by that a decision. So the fact that Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez was able to get that of the stoppage definitely was impressive. Now, of course, certain people may bring up the point that Juan Francisco Estrada, that he is getting a little bit older or a little bit long in the tooth. He is 34 years old, and on top of that, he hasn't fought within about a year and 7 months, or around there. But anyways, I was still very excited for this up-and-coming fight because Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, of course, this kid, he's very special. Of course, one of the fighters that has been talking about him now, at least within recency, who, of course, Mr. DontaesBoxingNation, who we're going to review right here, attacked Mr. Shakur Stevenson when he mentioned Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez potentially being top 10 pound per pound. And right now, I don't think that there's any doubt about it. I think that Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez has to be in the conversation, if not definitively on the top 10 pound per pound list. Because other than the knockdown that I believe ended up happening in round 6, I believe that it was round 6, when Estrada ended up landing a very good right cross, I believe, on on Bam Bam Rodriguez's face. Other than that, this fight pretty much was a complete, utter domination over a fighter that probably would have been debatably top 10 pound per pound formerly. And he also ended up stopping another top 10 pound per pound fighter, former top 10 pound per pound fighter in Sarangvisai, the same Thai fighter that, of course, ended up beating that of Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. Now, of course, we can debate about how great those fighters actually were, because some, of course, may debate that Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, that he was, maybe a little bit overrated in terms of the pound per pound list, at least being ranked number 1. But he certainly would have been top 10 pound per pound, on my list at a certain point in time. So the fact that he was able to do that to Estrada and Sarangvisai and some of those other guys and be so dominant and able to stop both of those guys, this kid definitely is special. And if you're personally asking me, the most talented and the most skilled Mexican fighter new on the block, when you talk about the quote-unquote face of new Mexican boxing, I believe that, of course, it may potentially be David Benavidez, just because he's in the division with Canelo Alvarez, and of course they may try to attach his name to that, and of course he's a very entertaining fighter. But when you talk about in terms of the most skilled Mexican fighter that may be potentially upcoming for this new generation, it is not David Benavidez. It is Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, at least in my personal view. And this kid, he basically showed a great amount of boxing ability and craft within this fight. And Estrada, of course, he's a very decently talented boxer as well. But this was basically a matchup. It reminded me very similar to the Tyson Fury versus Vladimir Klitschko thing, where where basically, of course, for a certain amount of you that have watched that fight, you may not think that Tyson Fury, of course, did as dominant as what Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez was in this fight. And that's very true. Fury, I thought, clearly won the fight 9 rounds to 3, but he wasn't quite as impressive nor as dominating as what Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez wasn't here. But the reason why it reminded me of that fight is because when Tyson Fury was in the ring and when he was moving and jabbing against Vladimir Klitschko and his size and his movement and his boxing ability, it really threw Vladimir Klitschko off guard. And you could tell that Klitschko, of course, he was a little bit older in age, but you could also tell that this was just a type of person and a type of boxer that he had just never really seen before. And I think that that same thing really happened here. Juan Francisco Estrada is a very decently great fighter. But Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, just in terms of the talent department, I think that he beats him in just about everything. I think he beats him in head movement. I think that he beats him in angles. I think that he beats him in, fast feet and footwork. Basically he fought like a prime Vasily Lomachenko within this fight. He fights very similar. Now, of course, he does use that same high guard that Vasily Lomachenko uses, which oftentimes will mean that he's open a little bit more to the body. And even a lot of Francisco's advice within the corner was to go to the body. Ironically, of course, as we see right here, he got hit with a very good liver shot, I believe with an uppercut or a hook with the left hand of Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, which of course ended up stopping him. you know. But anyways, Dante's Boxing Nation is going to talk about it. I felt a little bit more lazy, and on top of that, wanted to see what Dante's opinion was. So we're going to review his video, and we're going to see, of course, what he has to say about it. And of course, another big question is this: what is the next big fight for Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez? And what fight is he potentially going to take? Because, of course, a lot of people are now all kind of thinking the same thing, which is that the next big fight could potentially be that of Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez versus Naoya Inoue, the Japanese monster. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what Dante has to say.
Dontaes Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, he knocks out Francisco Estrada with a body shot. He knocked him out in the 7th round. He knocked him down with a left hand to the head in the 5th round. This was a very impressive performance by Bam Bam. Outside of Bam Bam getting knocked down himself, Estrada knocked him down with a straight right. But Estrada, he looked extremely slow in this fight. And Bam Bam, he definitely took advantage of that, using angles, and he was just on a different level compared to Estrada. He also
I don't think that there was really one thing that Estrada ended up beating Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez in, except other than that of experience. I mean, Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez just literally had him beat in every single category. Foot movement, head movement, you know, I think that moving around, you know, even punching power, it looked like, you know, or, you know, it was at least right on par with that hand speed. And he also looked a little bit bigger than Juan Francisco Estrada as well. He looked at least probably one, you know, at least small weight class bigger than Juan Francisco Estrada. So Juan Francisco Estrada, who of course is a warrior and a great fighter himself, you know, not only is it probably getting close to the time to where he's going to have to retire, but Juan Francisco Estrada, he's just not the fighter that Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez is. He's just not.
Throwing Estrada, he took his belt, moving up in weight, or before Estrada, he was at 115, he moved down in weight, and then he moved back up because there were no fights at 112. Now, in Estrada, he wasn't undefeated. He had losses on his record before this fight, but he had never been beat this way before. Now, even though Roman Gonzalez is towards the end of his career, it would be a great matchup to see Bam Bam Rodriguez against Roman Gonzalez. But there is a rematch clause for the Estrada fight, and according to Estrada, he's going to exercise it.
Well, Estrada's going to have his career ended because, no offense against Juan Francisco Estrada, but I really don't know a lot of adjustments that he's going to be able to make within this fight. Like I said, I've never seen a fight in boxing history where one fighter just ends up getting their ass kicked pretty much throughout the whole entire fight, and then that fighter ends up coming back and winning the rematch. And it's no offense against Juan Francisco Estrada, and of course, I'm not necessarily advising against a rematch clause. The man is 34 years old. He might as well, you know, advance the rematch clause because at the end of the day, your career is going to come to an end eventually. And Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, his star is shooting up very, very quickly. So, to be honest with you, even though usually I would not recommend a rematch clause after such fights like this, I understand why Juan Francisco Estrada would basically want to take this rematch. I understand. And of course, he's a great champion, so at the end of the day, he's somewhat owed that. But, you know, at least if he has a rematch clause. But I just don't see the fight panning out any differently.
Who usually moves more in fights, he usually boxes more. He said after the fight, when he did his post-fight interview, that was the mistake he made.
Well, Juan Francisco Estrada, you know, he does have very good lateral movement. But in terms of basically a certain amount of other movement, like foot movement, and also in terms of judging the distance and also the size that Bam Bam Rodriguez had, and consistent changing of levels and setting up traps and changing head movement, you know, what this fight actually kind of reminded me of was Marco Antonio Barrera versus Manny Pacquiao. This is actually a great fight comparison for that, because Marco Antonio Barrera always had great lateral movement, but he didn't have the greatest of head movement at times. So he was able to beat certain guys like Prince Nassim Hamed or certain guys like Eric Morales, you know, certain guys that also at times had certain defensive deficiencies, or maybe fighters that also could have moved their head a little bit more. But when he was in the ring against Manny Pacquiao had the better foot movement and foot speed. He had the better head movement. One thing about Manny Pacquiao that you always notice is that he's always changing levels and that he is always moving his head. It's very similar with Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. And on top of that, even though he keeps a consistent high guard, which of course, once again, he'll have to be careful, especially when defending to the body, but he's very defensively responsible.
In this fight. He should have boxed more. He says he's going to fix that problem when they have the rematch, but it doesn't really matter how much he moves around the ring because he can't match Bam Bam's speed or his angles and his technique.
There's just, once again, there's just almost nothing that Juan Francisco Estrada beats Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez in my personal view. Just not one thing. He doesn't beat him in foot movement, like I said. He doesn't beat him in foot speed. He doesn't beat him in head movement. He doesn't beat him in almost literally any category. The only chance that Juan Francisco Estrada, I think, would have is if he's able to kind of bully Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez a little bit in the rematch. And to be fair, I haven't watched enough of Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez to see how he fights on the back foot. But to be honest with you, he seems like a very great all-around fighter. So we'll see what happens.
Seen Bam Bam in the past look very flawed against.
But I do agree. I think that Juan Francisco Estrada is going to have to brawl a little bit more with Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. He's at least going to have to give it a shot because he's not going to be able to outbox that of Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. It's not going to happen.
Certain opponents, lesser opposition, but he really stepped his game up against Francisco Estrada. And now I truly believe that.
Let me rewind that actually really quickly.
Technique. We've seen Bam Bam in the past look very flawed against certain opponents, lesser opposition, but he really stepped his game up against Francisco Estrada. And now I truly.
Well, I'd have to see exactly what he was talking about because apparently from what I hear, the Sonny Edwards win was a big win because Sonny Edwards was looked at as a very decently skilled fighter in the lower weight classes, even though these guys didn't talk about it whatsoever. And apparently he also beat Sorang Visai very dominantly. So to be honest, I would need to know exactly what fights he's talking about. But it's very interesting, once again, how DontaesBoxingNation, with a lot of fighters, once again, who are not Black American fighters, he's always willing to tear down their level of competition. And then when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis, who of course is one of the new bigger stars on the scene, he tries to give you this bullshit overall about how, once again, you know, oh, he's fighting, you know, all these unique styles. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Believe that he proved that he's the best at 115 right now. Not to mention he's only 24 years old, so that means eventually he's going to be fighting against other undefeated contenders his age. And it'll be even more interesting when he does. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it. A big part of the reason why I also wanted to review DontaesBoxingNation is because I knew that this dude once again was gonna say something about lower level competition. Listen, Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez right now, he's a top 10 pound per pound fighter. Just in my personal view. I don't have any doubt about that. When you talk about Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, in my view, he has to be right there with Gervonta Tank Davis. He has to be right there with some of those other fighters because Juan Francisco Estrada, he was once upon a time looked at as a top 10 pound per pound fighter. And of course, the last win that he got was over Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. I probably would have gave the fight to Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, but it was still a very competitive fight. So Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez is a very special fighter. But of course, the question out there is that, is he potentially going to fight that of Naoya Inoue? And I have no doubt that that fight can eventually happen, but I just don't see that fight happening right now. But it's going to be interesting because Naoya Inoue, I'm sure, will have plans eventually of moving up to 126 pounds, which apparently is going to be his next move. Of course, we've seen him last time at the Shu Carrington fight, the Bruce Carrington fight, who Inoue clearly sees as someone that appears to be a great talent, and his name rumbling through that, you know, of the grapevine to possibly facing him. And of course, Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez is out there now as well. So we might actually have some mega super fights overall within that of the 115 all the way to 126 pound weight classes, which we, to be quite honest with you, really haven't had, you know, in quite some time. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this is going to pan out, to see if Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez could potentially fight that of Inoue. But I just don't know if that fight is good right now for Jesse Bam Bam's career, because Inoue is a type of guy that not only is he adjusted to the higher weight classes at the moment, kind of like Canelo would be when he fought Jamel Charlo, even though they'd probably be more around the same size, in all honesty. But the thing would be is that Inoue is a type of guy to where he's just a very destructive puncher. And he's a guy to where he has so much power, he has so much speed, and he has so much athleticism, and honestly just so much talent to where if you lose to Inoue, to be quite honest with you, your career may never look the same. And I still have not seen Steven Coolboy Fulton, you know, ever fight pretty much again after he ended up losing to that Inoue. So we'll see what ends up happening. But But like I said, it's going to be very particularly interesting. I would love to see a fight between Inoue and Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. It'd be very interesting. And I do believe that whoever, of course, that they would clearly be the two best and most skilled fighters that they would ever fight. And that'd be an interesting fight because, I may bet on Inoue, at the moment, but that doesn't mean that I would 100% bet on him. It'd be interesting. I'll tell you what, I believe that Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, that he would have a chance in an Inoue fight. I do believe that he would have a chance. So we'll see what ends up happening. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later, and we'll see if there is a rematch between these two fighters.